In August of 1994, 2 children vanished from a family hiking trip in Pisgah National Forest. No bodies were ever found, just a crayon drawing pinned to a tree, and 6 haunting words scrawled in a child's hand. We found a new mommy. 30 years later, someone just reopened the case. Not because of evidence, but because the forest started speaking again. Say my name. Some names never make it home. Others were never meant to. Subscribe if you want to know what's buried beneath the roots. August 1994, Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina. The fog hung low that morning, blanketing the Appalachian Range like a secret whispered too quietly to be understood. The Carter family, David, Elaine, and their 7-year-old twins, Lily and Caleb, had chosen this weekend for a bonding hike. They were staying at a nearby rental cabin for 3 days. It was David's idea. After months of quiet arguments, veiled silences, and missed dinners, he had sold the idea with forced enthusiasm. "Fresh air," he'd said, "does wonders." They parked their sedan at the gravel pull-off around 7:12 a.m. David marked the trailhead sign with a thumbs up for the camcorder. Elaine, visibly tired, kept glancing at her watch. The twins trailed behind, dragging their toy backpacks and exchanging private giggles. Lily had packed a plastic unicorn, Caleb a Spider-Man figure with the paint scratched off its face. The children's trail, as the sign read in bold wood-carved letters, had recently been reopened. It was originally part of a logging route in the 1930s, now repurposed for family hikes. Short, safe, well-marked. But what happened that morning would dismantle the illusion of safety forever. By 3:27 p.m., the first 911 call was placed. Elaine was screaming, her voice cracked with panic. "We lost them, both of them. We only turned around for a second. They were just there." The dispatcher struggled to get coordinates as David's voice cut in, breathless and ragged. "I told them not to go ahead. Caleb said he saw a cabin. He said he saw something in the woods." When rangers arrived, the parents were combing the edge of the trail in erratic circles, calling names until their voices went hoarse. No broken branches, no signs of a struggle, no blood. No shoe prints beyond a short distance from where the children were last seen. Just one thing. About 100 yards off trail, pinned to a tree with an old railroad spike, was a torn piece of sketch paper. It depicted 2 small stick figures, holding hands, and a third, taller figure drawn in red crayon. No face, no arms, just long legs and a round head. Scrawled in shaky handwriting, "We found a new mommy. She lives under the roots." The room smelled of damp paper and old coffee. Detective Jessa Morgan pulled on the fluorescent chain above her desk, casting a harsh white glow over a mountain of file boxes. She hated this room. It felt like a graveyard, not for people but for truth. Cases left here never found resolution. They just faded. She sat at the far end of the Asheville County Police Department's records wing, in what used to be a storage room. Now it housed the cold case unit, a 3-person team operating under a tight budget and even tighter scrutiny. At 43, Jessa had the hardened eyes of someone who had worked homicide too long but still believed in resolution. Not justice, not anymore. Just truth. The kind you could document, process, and file. "Your new rabbit hole," said Mark, the unit's analyst, sliding a tan folder onto her desk. His tone was half joking, but the dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd stayed late digging for it. She flipped the folder open. Case 94-821. Carter Twins Disappearance. Pisgah Forest. August 14th, 1994. The first page was a photocopy of the children's missing poster. Lily and Caleb, both grinning with baby teeth and sun-faded freckles. Matching red jackets. She lingered on their eyes. Caleb's looked like he was mid-joke. Lily's had that strange calm children sometimes wore when they understood more than they were supposed to. What prompted this? Jessa asked, thumbing through the incident report, search maps, and witness statements. Mark leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Anonymous tip, yesterday. Jessa raised an eyebrow. On a 31-year-old case? He nodded. Call came in from a restricted number. Male voice said, "The Carter kids weren't lost. They were taken. Check the routes." Then hung up. The routes. Mark nodded toward the box under the desk. You'll want to see what was recovered with the original report. Jessa lifted the lid. Inside was a sealed plastic evidence bag containing the drawing. The one pinned to the tree. It was worse in person. The crayon had faded, but the childlike handwriting was unmistakable. "We found a new mommy. She lives under the roots." She exhaled. Jesus. That was Caleb's handwriting, Mark added. Confirmed by his second-grade teacher at the time. Jessa's stomach tightened. "You said they were never found." Not even a shoelace. The parents were cleared. They were devastated, high profile, even past Polly's. Hikers found nothing. Thermal drones found nothing. Then the story dried up. "What about the sketch?" Jessa asked. "Any forensic testing?" "Limited." This was 94, pre-DNA boom. They dusted it for prints, but it had been handled by too many people. They just archived it. Jessa stared at the drawing. 3 figures. 1 red. That evening she drove out to the Pisgah trailhead, against protocol. The forest was silent, dense, heavier than she remembered. 30 years of overgrowth had blurred the landscape, but the children's trail sign remained, aged, the lettering sunken like carved skin. She walked until the temperature dropped slightly. A bend in the trail opened to an old wooden mile marker, half rotten. And then she saw it. The tree, thick, split near the base, with roots that curled like fingers above the soil. The same one shown in the crime scene photos. Jessa knelt and ran her hand over the bark. A faint rust ring remained where the railroad spike had once been embedded. Her hand trembled. From the shadows behind her, a faint crunch of leaves. She stood quickly, reaching for her holster. Nothing. The woods were still. Too still. The next morning she filed the paperwork to reopen case 94-821. Her superior, Captain Breyer, frowned. "We're 2 weeks from budget review. You want to chase ghost stories? I have a credible anonymous tip and physical evidence that was never fully analyzed." "Credible?" he scoffed. "You don't even have a callback number. I also have a sketch made by a child that suggests abduction." "You have fiction." Jessa leaned forward. "If there's even a chance those kids were taken, if someone knew where they went, we need to act." Breyer rubbed his eyes. "You have 2 weeks. No overtime, no press." She didn't need fanfare, just time. That afternoon, she drove to Elaine Carter's last known address. The house sat on the edge of town, smaller than she'd imagined. Faded blue shutters, overgrown lawn, wind chimes moving without wind. Elaine answered after a long pause. She was in her 60s now, thin, brittle-looking, hair tied back in a way that seemed permanent, as if she never took it down. Jessa introduced herself gently. "I'm reopening your children's case." Elaine's face didn't move for a moment. Then she stepped aside. "You're 31 years too late." Inside, the home was dim. No children's photos on the walls, only paintings of trees, roots, and mountain ridges. Elaine offered tea. Declined. "I'm sorry to bring this pain back," Jessa said. It never left. Jessa opened her notebook. "Can you tell me anything about that day that you might not have mentioned before?" "Anything unusual?" Elaine paused. "They kept saying they saw someone in the woods." "Who?" "They called her the Root Lady. Said she wore a dress made of moss and leaves." Elaine stared at her lap. "Caleb said she didn't have a face." Jessa noted the description. "You didn't tell police this?" "They said it was imagination. Children's games. Said I was grieving, not thinking straight." Jessa nodded. Did either of them ever draw her? Elaine walked into the other room and returned with a thin, dust-covered sketchbook. She opened it slowly, revealing child drawings, most benign, until one stood out. A tall figure in red, no face, no arms, buried beneath roots. That night, Jessa sat at her kitchen table surrounded by the old case files. She had Lily's sketchbook, Caleb's handwriting sample, ranger interviews, and weather reports. And still, no logical thread. Until she zoomed in on one ranger's incident report from the original investigation. Found a small underground space about 300 feet north of the drawing site. Structure seemed unnatural. Wood beams embedded into soil. Possibly old mine. Entry collapsed. Wasn't in search zone. No follow-up. No further exploration. Just a footnote. Jessa circled the paragraph. In red ink. The forest changed after dusk. By day, Pisgah National Forest felt like a memory. A place families had passed through for generations, breathing in the deep green silence of the Blue Ridge. But by night, it became something else. Older, more secretive. A place with its own pulse. Detective Jessa Morgan parked her car at the base of the trail just after 6 p.m., flashlight clipped to her vest, boots tight around her ankles. She'd reviewed the ranger's 1994 report a dozen times. The wording was vague, almost hesitant, as if the ranger didn't fully believe what he'd found. Structure seemed unnatural. Entry collapsed. Wasn't in search zone. She checked her GPS. 300 feet northwest from the tree with the sketch. She set off, pushing through low ferns and dense brush, the faint trail barely visible. If it had been used before, nature had long reclaimed it. 30 minutes in, Jessa spotted something strange, a flat shelf of stone rising slightly above the leaf-covered ground. Not a boulder, not a natural formation. The edges were cut, clean. Man-made. She swept her flashlight across it. Beneath the moss and debris, a rectangular outline emerged, like a trap door sealed shut. Along the edges, ancient iron hinges had rusted through, binding the stone into place. Heart pounding, she dropped to her knees and brushed away layers of dirt. Her fingers caught on a groove, a circular indentation near the edge. It was designed to be opened. Jessa stood and radioed back to base. Unit 34, requesting backup. I've found something near the children's trail. Coordinates transmitting now. A static-laced reply. Roger, ETA 30 minutes. She sat back on her heels and waited, every muscle tense. She had learned long ago not to let her imagination run. But the stillness around her, it didn't feel empty. It felt watched. 34 minutes later, headlights bounced through the trees. Two rangers, Officer Mike Allen and rookie trainee Simone Lee, joined her. Mike, in his 50s, had a deep-set jaw and the cautious demeanor of someone who'd seen too much. Simone was in her 20s, curious and eager but visibly nervous. You weren't kidding, Mike said, eyeing the stone slab. Can we move it? Jessa asked. Let's find out. They worked together with metal pry bars from Mike's truck. The stone resisted at first, but gave way with a groan, like something long dormant disturbed. Beneath it lay a narrow wooden ladder, broken halfway down. A shaft dropped into darkness. The smell was immediate, earth, mold, and something metallic. Mike shined his light. That's not natural. Support beams. Someone built this. A root cellar, Simone offered. Maybe, Jessa replied, or something else. They descended one by one. Mike went first, then Simone. Jessa followed last, the rotted wood creaking under her boots. She landed on packed dirt. The chamber was small, maybe 15 by 15 feet, with wooden walls reinforced by planks. A lantern hook hung empty from the ceiling. Simone gasped. Jessa turned her light toward the far wall. A drawing, faded but preserved in the dry air, was carved directly into the wood. Not paper this time. The same stick figures. 2 children, one taller figure in red. Beneath it, scratched like claw marks. Under the roots, she sings. Jesus Christ, Mike muttered. This was never in any report. Jessa examined the carving closely. There's more. To the left of the main image, a series of tallies, 50 or 60 vertical lines grouped in 5s. A count of something. Time. She turned to Mike. This wasn't just a hiding place. Someone lived here. Or kept someone here, he added grimly. Simone turned pale. We need to test this site. Soil, DNA, prints, everything. Jessa nodded. Seal it. Document it all. As they climbed back into the night air, Jessa felt something cold on her neck. A drop of water. She looked up. The tree canopy was motionless. No wind. No rain. Back at the station, the evidence techs worked late processing what they could from the chamber. Most of the walls were too dry or degraded for prints, but the scratched wood held promise. Simone collected soil samples from beneath the floorboards. Jessa, back at her desk, opened her laptop and pulled up old regional maps. She traced the terrain around the children's trail. Something about the ranger's description bothered her. A collapsed structure. The forest was known to have moonshiner tunnels, abandoned during Prohibition. She opened another tab. Missing persons reports from 1970 to 1995, all within 50 miles of Pisgah. 12 cases, 7 children, 5 adults. All unsolved, all hikers. And in 4 of them, she found a pattern. Drawings left behind. Descriptions of a woman in the woods. Claims of being watched, lured, or led away. One note from 1983, written by a missing girl's brother, sent a chill through her. She said the singing was coming from underground, that a lady wanted to show her the roots. The next day, forensic results came in. Partial strands of child DNA recovered from under a floorboard. Mitochondrial analysis confirmed it. A familial match to Lily Carter. Jessa sat back in her chair, chest tight. Lily had been in that room, alive. Elaine Carter arrived at the precinct 2 hours later, summoned by Jessa with urgent news. When shown the photo of the underground chamber and the carving, she collapsed into the nearest chair. They were there, all this time, right under the trail. She buried her face in her hands, and no one listened. Jessa knelt beside her. Elaine, there's more. There are other disappearances, and they all seem to tie back to this same place. Elaine looked up, face pale but resolute. Then you need to speak to someone who was there. Who? Elaine hesitated. David, my ex-husband, Caleb's father. I thought he moved away. He didn't. He lives in the woods now, not far from where it happened. Jessa stared at her. He stayed? Elaine's voice trembled. He's been looking, every day, for 30 years. The cabin didn't exist on any map. To find it, Jessa had to follow Elaine's hand-drawn directions. A winding series of back roads off Highway 276, past the cemetery, then a rusted gate chained but unlocked. From there, it was a slow mile by foot. Overgrown forest pressed in from both sides, the trail narrowing to little more than animal tracks. Her boots sank into the loam as she approached a clearing. The cabin stood at the center, skeletal and silent. The wood was weathered gray, the roof partially collapsed, and the porch was cluttered with firewood, tools, and jars filled with murky fluid. A long dead deer skull was nailed above the door. She paused. David Carter, she called. A pause, then a voice from within. Leave the gun on the porch. She stepped slowly up the stairs, unholstering her sidearm and placing it on a bench. The door creaked open. David Carter stood there, bearded, gaunt, his face a gaunt map of scars and sun damage. His clothes were mismatched layers of flannel and canvas. His eyes, sunken but alive, met hers with quiet calculation. You the cop? I'm Detective Jessa Morgan. He stepped aside without another word. The inside was worse. Piles of books, maps nailed to walls, photographs, some faded beyond recognition, strewn across tables. At the center of it all was a massive corkboard covered in red string, pins, and note cards. It looked like madness, but it was organized. David poured her a cup of instant coffee and motioned for her to sit. She declined the drink. "I spoke to Elaine," Jessa began. "We found a buried chamber near the children's trail. Your daughter was there." He flinched. "Alive?" he asked, barely a whisper. Jessa paused. "There were traces of her DNA, but that's all." David nodded, eyes glassy. I always knew she was down there. But no one believed me. They said I was grief mad. They were right." "You stayed here," Jessa said quietly. He gestured around. "I couldn't leave. Not while she might still be out there." Jessa moved closer to the corkboard. She recognized some of the photos, missing children. She touched a note dated 1977. "You've tracked others. Before my kids, after, all near Pisgah. Disappearances with no sign of struggle, always kids, always close to this stretch of trail." Jessa scanned a group of hand-drawn maps, eyes settling on one that marked a symbol, an eye inside a root. "What's this?" David turned. "I call it the mouth." "Excuse me? It's not just a cave, it's something older. The place we found, it's one entrance. There are more, all connected, tunnels like veins under the forest." "That's folklore. It's more than that. These forests were considered cursed long before settlers came. Cherokee wouldn't cross certain ridge lines. They called it the place of singing dirt." He gestured to a book. "And you think this mouth or network is behind the disappearances?" "I know it." Jessa took a deep breath. "David, what did Caleb say to you before he vanished?" David stared into the dark corner of the cabin for a long moment. Then he spoke. "He was always drawing her, the root lady. At first I thought it was a phase. Kids see shadows in trees and make stories. But he'd wake up screaming. Said she whispered to him at night, told him to come find her, that she had a secret garden under the ground." Jessa said nothing, just listened. "One day, a week before we went hiking, I found a sketch in his room. Not his usual crayon scrawls. This was detailed, obsessive. It showed our family, and her. Tall, red, no face, and beneath us, roots like veins pulling us downward." David's hands trembled. "I burned it. I was scared. Not of the drawing, but of how real it looked. Like he'd seen it with his own eyes." Jessa moved to another section of the corkboard. Pinned near the center was a photo of a tree, one that twisted unnaturally, with its roots tangled above the ground. The caption beneath read, "She sleeps beneath the crooked birch." David followed her gaze. "That's where they go. I've tracked them at night. Movement, footprints, never more than 2. Sometimes just 1, small, barefoot. You think someone's still out there? I know they are." Jessa took out her phone and showed him the drawing recovered in 1994. David's face crumpled. "That was Caleb's handwriting," he whispered. "They found a new mommy." She nodded. "We believe whoever took them used that chamber, but we also think it wasn't the only one." David stood suddenly and pulled open a drawer. He handed her a photo. It showed the same kind of trap door, half buried in earth, surrounded by dead vines. "Taken this spring, 10 miles west of the first site." "Why didn't you report it?" "No one listens to a man who lives in the woods." Jessa studied the image. The door looked nearly identical. "There's more," he said. "I found another drawing, last month." He pulled it from a weatherproof folder. The sketch was crude, but haunting. A child's rendition of someone reaching out from the ground. A speech bubble read, "Don't go to sleep or she'll take your name." "Where did you find this?" Jessa asked. Wedged in a tree knot, fresh, not weathered. Maybe 2 weeks old. Which means she's still taking them. Later that night, Jessa returned to her car, mind spiraling. She didn't know what disturbed her more, David's obsessive research, or the fact that it all lined up. What if this wasn't over? What if the Carter twins weren't the only ones who were lured? She drove the dirt trail back toward the main road, headlights bouncing over trees. Then, at the very edge of the forest, her brights caught a shape on the side of the trail. She slammed the brakes. A wooden doll, crudely carved, sat upright on a moss-covered log. It wore a red dress made from faded cloth. No face, no arms, just long legs. Jessa stepped out of the car slowly. Pinned to its chest with a twig was a folded piece of paper. She opened it. A child's drawing. 2 new figures. One taller, one small, holding hands. Beneath them, in smeared graphite, Caleb says we can come back now. He says she's asleep. The investigation was no longer unofficial. After Jessa filed the latest evidence, DNA from the underground chamber, the new doll, and the fresh child's drawing, the case was formally reopened under the North Carolina Bureau of Investigation, NCBI. But Jessa kept lead. By the end of the week, she'd assembled a special task group. Simone Lee, the ranger trainee with field knowledge and a steady hand. Dr. Devin Rourke, a forensic anthropologist with wilderness recovery experience. Kendra Chase, a search and rescue specialist and former military tracker. And reluctantly, David Carter, the father who never left. Captain Breyer had protested, of course. He's unstable, Morgan. He's not a cop. He knows the ground better than anyone, she'd replied. And I trust him. That trust would soon be tested. August 26th, 6:43 a.m., Pisgah National Forest. Search Zone 3. The air was already hot by sunrise. Mist curled through the trees like the breath of something sleeping. The team assembled near a ridge that overlooked Hollow Fork, a narrow stretch of untouched forest dense with pine and moss. The second trapdoor, the one in David's photo, had been spotted somewhere near here. They fanned out in formation. 2 up front, 2 behind, 1 in the center. For an hour, they found nothing. No movement, no tracks. Then Simone called out, "Here!" They gathered around her crouched figure. She pointed to the moss-covered ground. A pattern of flattened earth in a perfect rectangle. Buried, covered with bark and leaves, but faint lines betrayed the edges of something man-made. Kendra dug with her multi-tool, clearing dirt gently until wood surfaced. Not rotted. Fresh enough to creak when she tested it. Another door. David knelt and traced the edges. "She's been here." "You keep saying she," Dr. Rourke said, frowning. "You believe this is the same person? Across decades?" David didn't look up. "I don't think she's a person anymore." They opened it cautiously. Beneath lay a shaft, about 10 feet deep, reinforced with rotted timbers. At the base, a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Kendra tied a rope to her harness. "I'll go." "No," Jessa said. "We go in pairs. Simone, you're with me. Kendra, stay topside in prep gear. Devin, log everything." David looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. Jessa and Simone lowered into the dark. The tunnel was tight, the air stale with mildew. Flashlights barely cut the black. After 10 yards, the passage opened up. A small chamber, round, no more than 6 feet across. Wooden beams supported the ceiling, and again, on the walls, scratched drawings. Children. But these were different. Not stick figures. They were realistic. Dozens of children, etched with surprising detail. Some were sleeping, others looked wrong. Eyes too wide, mouths turned unnaturally upward. One wall held a series of names, carved hastily. Caleb Anna Jody Tyson, Rachel Dawn. "Jesus," Simone whispered. "These are real." Jessa photographed each one. "We need to compare these with the old missing persons records." In the corner of the chamber, something rustled. Jessa turned her light. "Movement. Stay behind me." She stepped forward, heart hammering. A tangle of burlap and branches. But beneath it, bones, small, scattered, chewed. Simone covered her mouth. "Is that human?" Dr. Rourke's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm picking up irregular EM readings from above. Are you two all right?" "Found a child skeleton. At least one. Possibly more. Send down the recovery kit." Jessa moved to the far wall and saw something new. A fresh message, scratched violently. "Don't wake her up." Back above ground, the air was different. Heavier. Kendra sat on a log, pale and sweating. Her eyes were unfocused. "You all right?" Jessa asked. I heard something." "What?" Kendra's eyes widened. "Singing. It was soft, like a lullaby. In another language, maybe." "No one else heard it?" Everyone shook their heads. Jessa turned to Simone. "Stay with her. Get her some water. Devin, scan her vitals. I want to know if there's an environmental trigger down there." "Could be radon," he muttered. "Or high CO2 levels." Jessa didn't respond. She kept hearing something too. Not a voice exactly. More like a hum vibrating behind her ears. 2:17 p.m. They returned to base camp with the recovered bones, photographs, and carved names. Devin began preliminary forensic work immediately. It would take time for DNA confirmation, but he was already certain. The remains are human, juvenile, at least 3 individuals. All died from blunt trauma, skull fractures, possibly inflicted by wood or stone, post-mortem damage from animals. Estimated time of death? Varies. One set is recent, within the last year. Jessa stared at the bones. This wasn't ancient horror. It was ongoing. That night, the team stayed at a ranger outpost. No one slept. Simone sat cross-legged by the fire, staring into the flames. "Did you hear it?" she asked Jessa quietly. "Hear what?" "In the tunnel, when you looked away. For just a second, there was a voice." Jessa said nothing. She didn't trust her own mind anymore. Later, Jessa reviewed the audio recording from her body cam. She hadn't listened closely before. She fast-forwarded through static, whispers, boots on wood, rustling. Then she heard it. A voice. Software female. Faint. Almost a lullaby. It repeated a phrase. She slowed the audio, filtering out background noise. "Don't let her see you." Her skin prickled. It wasn't Simone. It wasn't her. The next morning, Kendra was gone. Her bunk was untouched, her gear missing. Outside, only one set of footprints led from the camp toward the trail. Jessa followed them to the edge of the forest, where they simply stopped, like the earth had swallowed her. Pinned to a tree nearby was a crumpled drawing, a child holding hands with a taller figure in red. Above them, another figure, face down in the dirt, a stick labeled K, and below it, scrawled in graphite. She was listening too hard. The search for Kendra Chase lasted less than 2 hours. Rangers brought dogs, infrared scopes, and air drones. The forest gave them nothing. No scent trail, no heat signatures, no gear, no signs of struggle. She had simply walked into the woods and never come back, just like the Carter twins, just like the others. And pinned to a tree, another drawing. Each one got more detailed, more confident. Like whoever was making them was watching, learning. This one showed 4 people. 2 adults, 2 children. One adult had long hair. One wore a badge. The child with pigtails held a shovel. In the corner, an upside-down face. Blank eyes, no mouth, just roots tangled around its neck. August 27th, 5:42 a.m. Ranger Outpost Number 9. "You need to pull your team," Captain Breyer barked over the sat phone. You've already lost one. This isn't salvageable anymore, Morgan. Jessa rubbed her eyes, standing outside in the morning fog. We've found human remains. Multiple disappearances tied together by evidence. You want me to walk away? I want you to survive, he growled. And if you don't leave, your badge won't mean much longer. She said nothing. Not because she agreed, but because he might be right. Simone hadn't spoken since last night. She sat by the fire, knees drawn to her chest, sketching absently into a notebook. Not her own drawings. She was copying the ones they'd found, page by page. When Jessa tried to ask why, she only whispered, "To remember the order." David watched them both from a distance. He hadn't slept either. That afternoon they set out to find the mouth. According to David's maps, it was located near the upper ridge above Pine Hollow, a place he only found once, at dusk, after following a sound he could never replicate. "This won't be on GPS," he warned as they hiked. "You'll feel it before you see it." Jessa wasn't sure what that meant, but 4 hours later, she knew. They stepped into a clearing, and everything changed. The air was wrong, cooler, too still. The sounds of birds, wind, even their footsteps seemed dulled. Moss covered everything, including rocks that looked melted at the edges. At the far end of the clearing, half buried beneath earth and ivy, was a massive, ancient tree. Its trunk split wide, roots curled like tentacles. And nestled between them, a door, wooden, arched, covered in carvings. It looked like it had grown from the tree itself. "Is that it?" Jessa asked quietly. David only nodded. His expression was unreadable. Simone stood back, arms crossed over her chest. "It's wrong." They approached the door cautiously. Jessa touched the carvings. The wood was warm. Not from the sun. It had been in shadow, but from within, like the tree itself was alive. "What are the symbols?" she asked. David pointed. "Those are root sigils, pagan maybe. And here," he traced a circular shape, an open mouth surrounded by spirals. "She feeds on names." "What?" "That's what the lore says. The spirit underground, she takes your name first. If she knows it, she can pull you in." Jessa's skin prickled. "Where did you hear that?" "Old mountain legends. A woman who wandered too far, took a wrong step, and fell into the dirt. She never left. Became something else. Children hear her humming through the roots. If they follow the song..." He trailed off. Simone's radio clicked with static. Then a voice. Faint. Wrong. "Caleb. Lily. Lily. Caleb." The names repeated, distorted. They all froze. "No one's broadcasting," Simone said. That's not possible." Then the door creaked. It moved, just slightly. A breath. David stepped back. "She knows we're here." They retreated. Back at the outpost, Simone finally spoke. "That wasn't feedback. That was a transmission. And those names, those voices, they're from the missing. I've been reviewing the audio logs. It matches the cadence of old family videos. You can match the pitch. Caleb's voice when he was 7. Lily's laugh. Are you saying..." "I don't know," Simone interrupted. "But something's recording them, mimicking them." Dr. Rourke, reviewing the recovered bones, confirmed the newest set belonged to a girl between 6 and 9 years old. DNA was inconclusive, but the timeline fit. It could be Lily, or someone else. Simone looked up from the sketchbook. "She's growing stronger," she said. "What do you mean?" "She used to leave drawings. Now she's using names. She's calling them." That night, Jessa lay awake. She couldn't stop hearing it. The whisper. "Don't wake her up." What if this wasn't a serial killer? What if it wasn't human at all? She rose quietly, grabbing her boots and flashlight. At the edge of the clearing, David was waiting. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Neither could I." They stood in silence for a long moment. Then David said something he'd never admitted aloud. I think Caleb is still alive. Jessa turned slowly. Because I can feel him, he whispered. Sometimes I see footprints near my cabin. Small ones. Fresh. I think he's trying to come back, but she won't let go. Jessa didn't argue, because part of her believed it too. The next morning, the door to the mouth was open. Fully. A tunnel yawned beneath it. Dirt stairs descending into blackness. A note had been nailed to the bark beside the entrance. Another drawing. This one showed a woman in red. No face, arms long and twisted, cradling two children. One wore a badge, the other had Simone's name written under it. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, "Time to come home." Simone was gone by sunrise. No note, no gear missing, no footsteps away from camp. Just her sketchbook, open to a fresh page. A single image. The open door. The tree. And a child descending alone into the dirt. Jessa slammed it shut. "She went in," David said quietly. "We told her not to go anywhere alone." "She didn't go alone," he replied. Jessa turned sharply. "You think the thing took her? I think she was called." They stood at the edge of the clearing, staring into the open mouth of the forest. The stairs led down into absolute black. As they approached, a cool breath of air rose up from the shaft, damp, old, and sweet, like decaying fruit. David handed Jessa a bandana soaked in vinegar. "For the smell," he said. She accepted it, jaw tight. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. Jessa tightened her boots and holstered her flashlight. "She took Simone," she said. "That means she left the door open." And Jessa didn't believe in closed doors. Not anymore. 8:14 a.m. Descent begins. They stepped into the earth. The stairs creaked under their weight, but held. Each step was colder. The air grew damp, rich with the scent of rot and iron. The tunnel narrowed. Roots pierced through the walls like veins, pulsing faintly with some internal rhythm. "Light off," David whispered. "What?" "She sees the light." Jessa hesitated, then switched it off. Darkness swallowed them. She gripped his shoulder and followed by his touch, every step a whisper. At the bottom, the tunnel forked. Left, a warm draft and soft humming. Right, silence. "She always sings before she takes one," David whispered. "Lures them like sleepwalkers." They followed the hum. The path opened into a small chamber, barely taller than Jessa's head. In the center stood an altar, a flat slab of stone covered in dirt and moss. All around it were small wooden dolls, each carved differently, each labeled with a name. She recognized some: Tyson, Dawn, Rachel, Caleb, Lily, Kendra. No Simone, not yet. Jessa stepped forward. Her foot sank into something soft. She looked down. Dirt, but beneath it, fabric. She knelt and brushed it back. A ranger's patch, Simone's. It was still warm. Suddenly a sound behind them. A voice. "Jessa!" She turned. Simone stood at the edge of the chamber, barefoot, eyes glazed. Her voice was hollow. "She showed me something." "Simone, come to me," Jessa said. "She showed me what the names are for." David stepped forward. "Simone, don't say anything." "She said once a name is buried, it can't be used again." "Stop talking," David said more forcefully. "She keeps them down here, in the dark, because if they don't have names, they don't exist." Jessa moved toward her. "Simone, please, we're getting out of here." Simone blinked. "She wants yours next." The tunnel shook. A deep, low rumble passed through the earth like thunder trapped beneath bedrock. Then came whispers, echoing in impossible directions. Children's voices, crying, singing, begging, and one louder than all the others. "Caleb." David froze. "I hear him." "No," Jessa said. "It's not real." But he was already running down the tunnel, flashlight bouncing in jagged arcs. "David, wait!" Jessa turned to Simone, but she was gone again. Jessa chased David into the deeper chamber. The walls here were made of roots, woven tightly, forming a dome. In the center stood a hole, a pit leading straight down into pitch. David knelt beside it, whispering, "Caleb, it's me. I'm here, son. I'm here." From the pit, a voice floated up. "Dad?" A boy's voice. Fragile. Familiar. "Don't trust it," Jessa yelled. But David was crying now. "I knew you were alive. I knew it. I came for you. I never stopped." "Dad," the voice said, "just say my name. That's all she needs. Say it and I can come back." David opened his mouth. Jessa drew her weapon. "Don't." He looked up, tear-streaked. "She said—" "She's lying," Jessa snapped. "She's not Caleb. But what if—" "Caleb wouldn't ask you to say his name. He'd already know you remembered." David blinked, and then he screamed. A hand reached out from the pit. Long, root-covered, skin like bark. He scrambled back as the thing rose. A shape with no face. Tall, dressed in tattered red cloth. Its body formed from branches, bone, and whispers. Jessa fired. The shot passed through it like smoke. The thing recoiled, hissed like wind through dying leaves, then sank back into the hole. The chamber went silent. David collapsed, gasping. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I almost gave her his name." Jessa pulled him up. "You didn't. That matters." They turned to leave, and found Simone waiting. But she looked different. Still. Too still. Her eyes were black pits, and her mouth was moving, but no sound came out. Then her lips stopped, and in a child's voice, Jessa Morgan, you don't belong here?" Jessa stepped back, raising her gun. Simone smiled and blinked. And then her face changed. For a split second it became Lily's. 7 years old. Smiling. "Found a new mommy," she said softly. "Want to meet her?" The roots began to move. All around them, walls pulsed like a beating heart. The dolls fell from the altar, clattering like bones. Jessa grabbed David. "Run!" They didn't look back. By the time they reached the stairs, the tunnel behind them had collapsed. Dirt and roots blocked the way. The door to the mouth closed. But they were out. For now. The forest was silent as they limped back to the ranger outpost. Not dead silent, expectant, like the trees were listening. Simone didn't return. No trace of her. Only her sketchbook again, sitting neatly on the porch of the ranger station when they arrived. The page was blank except for a message scrawled in pencil. "Names are doors." You opened one. David slept for the first time in 3 days. Jessa didn't. She pored over Simone's notebook, studying every sketch. Some were clearly drawn before they entered the mouth. Records of evidence, timelines, names. Others, though, they weren't hers. The style changed, became more childlike, more erratic. One page simply repeated the phrase, "She is the name under the soil." She is the name under the soil. Another showed stick figures with no heads. Beneath them, "If you forget who you are, you stay." Jessa stepped outside into the pre-dawn cold and lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. She hadn't smoked in 4 years. The forest loomed. The mouth was closed, but the feeling hadn't left her. Something had marked her down there. Not physically, not yet. But it was coming. August 29th, 7:30 a.m. Carter family cabin, isolated ridge. Elaine. Carter hadn't been contacted yet. She didn't answer her phone. Hadn't left the cabin in weeks. Jessa decided to tell her in person. The drive was winding, narrow. When she arrived, Elaine opened the door slowly, as if expecting someone else. "I'm sorry," Jessa said. "We found something, again." Elaine nodded, almost calmly. "It's never over, is it?" "No," Jessa said. "Not yet." Inside the cabin, nothing had changed. Same paintings of trees. Same silence. But this time, Jessa noticed something new. a faint trail of dirt leading down the hallway, into the children's old bedroom. Elaine followed her eyes. I thought it was just the wind. Jessa stepped quietly to the room and opened the door. The beds were still made, the toys untouched, and on the window pane, drawn in condensation and dust, were 2 small handprints. Beneath them, a single word, Dad. Jessa stepped closer. Etched faintly into the wooden windowsill, almost invisible unless you looked at the right angle, was a name. Caleb. She ran her fingers over the letters. Fresh. Elaine was behind her now, silent, shaking. He's still here, she whispered. I think he's trying to get out, Jessa replied. Elaine sat on the edge of the bed. She kept him all this time, and Lily, and now Simone. She feeds on names, Jessa said. When someone says a name or forgets it, it's like she gains power over them. Elaine looked up. But Caleb still remembers who he is. Jessa nodded slowly. Maybe that's why he hasn't disappeared completely. That evening, Jessa returned to the outpost and pulled every record from the 1994 investigation again. There was one report that had never been digitized. A handwritten interview from a retired fire lookout, now deceased. His name was Elias Brantley, and he'd worked near Pisgah for decades. Saw them once, those kids, a few weeks before they vanished. They were on the trail near the old burial ridge. The boy was humming. The girl was whispering to herself. They both looked pale, lost, like they were dreaming while awake. I called out, but they didn't answer. I heard something else, though. Another voice behind me said a name I hadn't heard in years. I turned, but no one was there. And the last line. There's something under the forest. It knows who you are. And once it does, it starts taking the rest of you. Jessa sat alone that night with a recorder and began speaking into it. She wanted a record. Not for the department, not even for Elaine. For herself. August 29th, Carter twins case reopened. 3 underground sites discovered, 1 anthropological anomaly confirmed. Multiple sets of remains recovered. Officer Simone Lee missing in action. Kendra Chase presumed deceased. Subject the mouth, confirmed real. I believe the entity or presence involved is tied to an ancient mythological structure. Possibly local folklore, possibly older. It seems to require names, spoken aloud or thought, to access or control memory and movement. The more names it gathers, the more powerful it becomes. My name is Jessa Morgan, and I am not forgetting who I am. She shut the recorder off. August 30th, 4:02 a.m. Back at the Carter cabin, Elaine called in a whisper. There's someone outside. A child. Jessa arrived within 40 minutes. Elaine met her at the porch, clutching a flashlight. I heard tapping on the window. Then, something moving around the side. They searched the perimeter. Found nothing, until Jessa spotted it. Footprints. Small, barefoot, leading into the woods. She followed them for 50 feet before they stopped. At the base of a familiar tree, a crumpled piece of paper pinned to it. A new drawing. This one was different. It showed a boy crouched beside a grave. Above it, a speech bubble. I buried my name so she couldn't take it. Back at the outpost, Jessa stared at the drawing for a long time. Then she opened Simone's notebook again, flipping to a blank page. She wrote a single line. Who are you, really? She closed the book and waited. The next morning, the notebook had been moved. That same page now had writing beneath her question. The answer was in Caleb's handwriting. I'm still me, but I can't come home until she forgets me. It started with a forgotten church. David had mentioned it once. An old ruin buried deeper in the forest, past a ravine no longer marked on any maps. He said it dated back to the late 1700s, a chapel used by early settlers who came here chasing cheap land and strange stories. They called it the Root House, not for what grew beneath it, but for what they buried inside. August 31st, 10:13 a.m. Ridge Line South, Pine Hollow. Jessa and David hiked in silence. The ravine had collapsed years ago. The ground was unstable, damp with rot and old mudslides. But after an hour of climbing, they found it. A stone foundation overrun with ivy and vines. 3 wooden beams still stood where a roof once had, forming the rough skeleton of a church. Inside, a stone altar, cracked in half. Beneath it, a box, carved into the top, nearly eroded. The record of the given and the taken. David opened it with a crowbar. Inside were pages bound in thread, ancient, their ink smeared and curling. A makeshift ledger of names, children's names. Beside each was a second column. Some were blank. Some said kept. Some said returned. But most said hollowed. They found her name halfway through the book. Ellery Wren, age 9, taken 1789. Hollowed. And beneath it, a note in smaller script. She walks still. She carries the roots. She takes names so she cannot remember her own. Jessa whispered aloud. She forgot who she was. David stepped back. That's it. That's why she needs names. She's not feeding on them. She's trying to fill the void. He nodded slowly. She can't leave the forest because she doesn't remember anything but this place. She takes others so they'll stay with her. Jessa stared at the stone. She doesn't even know she's doing it. They brought the ledger back to the outpost. Rourke and Elaine helped catalog the names. Simone's wasn't in it, nor was Kendra's, nor were the dozens of other missing from the modern era. She's not writing them down anymore, Jessa said. Elaine offered a grim possibility. What if she's not taking them for her anymore? That night, the audio logs picked up a new recording. Unprompted. A child's voice. Don't say it. Don't even think it. If you say it, it becomes real again. Then, a different voice. Caleb's. She's getting full. Soon she won't need names at all. She'll just take the rest of you. Jessa made a decision. If names gave this thing power, they had to take that power back. But how do you erase a name? She turned to David. What was her name again? He flipped through the ledger. Ellery Wren. Jessa wrote it down, then stared at the paper for a long time. What are you doing? Elaine asked. Jessa didn't answer. She lit the page with a match and let it burn in the metal sink. We're going to forget her, she said. David frowned. That's not enough. It's a start. The next morning, the sketchbook was different. The drawings were lighter, less frantic. One showed a tree with a door, but the door was closed and padlocked. Another showed a sunrise over a ridge, with 2 children standing at its edge. The last page was just this. Don't remember her. That's how we win. Jessa asked Elaine for a favor. Tell me something about Lily, anything, but leave out her name. Elaine blinked. She used to eat cereal without milk. Always said the milk made the crunch go away. They smiled briefly, and it held. Because that was the trick. Remember the child. Forget the name. You could keep the love, the memory, the soul, but without the name, the root woman couldn't take them. That afternoon they returned to the mouth, still closed. Jessa buried something at the base of the tree. A notebook, empty. No names inside. Just a single phrase on the cover. This stays closed. They turned to go, and from deep in the woods, a sound followed them. Not a whisper, not singing, laughter, children's laughter. Names were supposed to last forever. They were etched into headstones, whispered at birth, shouted across playgrounds, and remembered in grief. But something had shifted, and Jessa Morgan was beginning to realize. The forest didn't just take people, it took their names too. September 2nd, 8:55 a.m. Asheville County. Victims' Families Outreach. With Rourke and David cataloging the Root House ledger, Jessa began reaching out to families of other long-missing children. Those who'd vanished within 50 miles of the Pisgah Trail system between 1970 and 1995. 12 in total. Only 4 families remained in the area. Jessa visited them one by one. The first was Patricia Mendez, 81, whose grandson Daniel had vanished in 1981 at age 6. Her hands trembled as she poured tea. "He used to collect rocks," she said with a sad smile. "Not normal ones, flat ones shaped like teeth." Jessa nodded. "Do you remember what he looked like?" "Oh yes," Patricia said. "He had a scar right here." She traced her chin. "Tripped over a shovel once." Jessa hesitated. "What was his favorite toy?" Patricia blinked. "Oh, I don't—" She closed her eyes, visibly straining. "I can't picture it," she whispered. Jessa leaned forward. "His name. Say it." Patricia tried. Her lips moved. No sound. She began to cry. "I knew it all my life. I used to say it every day. Now I only remember that I loved him." The second family was a father, Michael Griggs, whose daughter had gone missing on a school field trip in 1975. He'd moved to a small assisted living home just outside Weaverville. She showed him a photo recovered from the cold case files, his daughter at age 7. He studied it. "That's her. I remember that face." "What was her name?" Jessa asked gently. He looked puzzled. That's my girl," he said. He couldn't say it. All 4 families told similar stories. They remembered the children, their personalities, their smiles, their strange habits. But the names had faded, as if time had worn them smooth, or something had intentionally scraped them away. Back at the outpost, Jessa shared her findings with Elaine and David. "She's severing the link between memory and identity," Jessa said. "When the name is gone, it's harder for them to be found, even harder for them to come back." Elaine stared at her hands. "But you remembered Lily." "No," Jessa said quietly. "You did. You protected her name. And maybe that's why Caleb is still fighting." That night, Jessa dreamed of the Root Woman. She was standing in a vast underground chamber, arms of tangled limbs and vines, head bowed, whispering dozens of names, none of which Jessa could hear. One child stood across from her, a boy, Caleb. He didn't speak, but he was smiling, and in his hands was a blank name tag. He placed it over his heart, and vanished. She woke in a sweat. The audio recorder on her nightstand was running. She hadn't turned it on. The playback was faint, but the voice wasn't hers. "You'll forget. You all forget." And then, quietly, "She's not done." September 3rd, 6:42 a.m., return to the mouth. The clearing was different now. No birds, no mist, just the tree, quiet and massive, like a monument to something no one remembered. David stood beside it, holding a can of paint. "What's that for?" He pointed to the tree's base. "We mark it." Jessa nodded. Unmissable. They painted a large white X across the roots, and then beside it, David wrote, "Do not name her." They planted cameras, audio devices, motion sensors, everything modern technology could offer. And then they walked away. That night, Jessa visited the county records office. She pulled every census from the 18th and 19th century. No one named Ellery Wren, not in birth registries, not in burial logs, not in any land claims or death records. She had never existed, not on paper, not in stone. The forest had erased her completely. And then, just before midnight, a call came in. Elaine, her voice was shaking. "Jessa, someone left a box outside my door." Jessa was there within the hour. Elaine met her in the kitchen, holding the box with oven mitts like it might bite. Inside were 3 dolls, all hand-carved. One had red yarn for hair, one wore a badge, and one had no face at all, just black paint smudged where features should have been. Each was labeled Lily, Jessa, Caleb. And at the bottom of the box, a note. "No one forgets forever." Jessa took the badge doll and placed it in the sink. She lit it on fire and watched until the black paint bubbled and peeled away. She's testing us. The next day, the recording devices around the mouth all failed. Wiped. Only one fragment remained. A child's voice repeating something over and over. My name is mine. My name is mine. My name is mine. Somewhere in the mountains, someone once figured out how to take a name back, not through prayer, not through fire, but through sacrifice. September 4th to 7:15 a.m. David Carter's cabin. The journals came from a chest under David's floorboards. Handwritten accounts passed down by mountain families, some dating back to the early 1800s. They weren't legal records. Not even stories, really. They were instructions, scratched into parchment and bark, bound by thread, hidden from the outside world. They all circled the same idea. To reclaim a name, one must give another in its place. A reverse binding, a name for a name. David ran a trembling hand over the pages. There was a child in 1823 who came back. His mother gave her name to the roots in his place. The forest took her. But the boy came home. Jessa's heart pounded. She replaced him. She became the remembered. He became the forgotten. Elaine sat across from them, pale but resolute. So that's the choice, she whispered. We either take Caleb back or let him go. Jessa closed her eyes. No, she said. There's another way. They spent the afternoon assembling everything they would need. The root house ledger, with names of the taken, the dolls, the faceless totems they had recovered, a piece of Caleb's handwriting, and, finally, something living, a memory of him no one else had. Not his name, not his voice, just a moment. Elaine volunteered. She told them the story as the sun set. When Caleb was 5, he tried to teach Lily how to skip rocks. She couldn't get it. She got frustrated. So he picked the biggest, flattest rock he could find and tossed it into the water. Didn't skip at all. He said, "See? Even I mess up big." She laughed. Softly. He wanted her to feel better, not perfect. Jessa wrote the memory down. Not the name, not the date, just the emotion, the feeling, the reason to come back. They returned to the mouth that night. It stood open again, no wind, no sound, just earth and black. Jessa held the notebook in one hand, the doll in the other. David carried the root house ledger. Elaine carried nothing. They descended in silence. The chamber hadn't changed, but something beneath it had. It was awake. They could feel it, like a second heartbeat beneath the soil. Jessa stepped forward and placed the doll on the altar. Then, beside it, the notebook with the memory. I'm not giving you a name, she whispered. I'm giving you a choice. The earth groaned. From the far tunnel came a whisper. Not in words, in feeling. Elaine stood beside Jessa. I remember, my child. You can take my voice, but you can't take my love. She opened her mouth and said nothing. No name, just a song, software wordless, a lullaby. The same one she used to hum when Caleb couldn't sleep. The roots around the chamber trembled, then retracted. From the shadows came a figure, small, barefoot, covered in dirt. A boy. His eyes were wide, afraid, but aware. Jessa stepped back. Caleb? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to Elaine and placed something in her hand, a rock, flat, wide. Even I mess up big, he said. Then he vanished. Elaine dropped to her knees, sobbing. The rock stayed in her hand, real, heavy, solid. When they returned to the surface, the tree had withered, its leaves brown and curled. The padlock Jessa had painted on its trunk split down the middle, and on the ground, a name tag. Blank. No one had written on it. But in the dirt beside it, Caleb had scratched a message. You didn't forget me. so she couldn't keep me. Back at the cabin, Elaine placed the rock on the mantel. No photo, no nameplate, just a symbol, a memory, and it was enough. That night, Jessa dreamed of the root woman again, but this time she was younger, a girl, sitting in a field, brushing her hair with a carved comb. No roots, no shadows, just light. She looked at Jessa and said, "Thank you." Then she faded. The mouth never opened again. The sketchbook pages stayed blank, and the whispering stopped. By the time they sealed the last chamber, the forest felt different, not safer, just emptier, like something had left and taken the gravity with it. September 5th, 9:12 a.m. Pisgah National Forest. Final site, Sector B7. The remaining underground site, the one west of the Children's Trail, was barely intact. It had collapsed inward, roots torn through the support beams like veins drying out. Dr. Rourke directed the final sweep, cataloging every splinter, scrap, and bone fragment. His voice, normally clinical, was subdued. "We've recovered the remains of at least 11 individuals," he said, "only 2 positively identified. Kendra Chase, and someone listed in the 1980 files as Jane Doe number 7, a girl missing from a nearby township whose name had been lost in local record misfires. Her family hadn't even known where to look." Jessa stared at the bagged evidence. "Do we tell them?" she asked. "Tell who?" "The families. If we can't give them a name." Rourke looked up, shadows under his eyes. "We give them something else." The state ordered the chambers permanently sealed, with reinforced concrete, flagged GPS fencing, and no entry status for all unmarked trails within a 5-mile radius. But Jessa kept the root house ledger. Quietly. It belonged in the dark, yes. But it also belonged remembered. Elaine returned to Asheville. She declined media interviews, declined departmental inquiries, declined the memorial. Instead, she painted. The first one she finished was a large canvas, 2 children holding hands on the edge of a trail, a sunrise behind them. No faces, just outlines. She titled it, "We Knew Each Other Once." David stayed in the woods, built a new cabin, smaller, off-grid. Jessa visited him once, bringing supplies. He didn't speak much, but before she left, he gave her a folded piece of paper. On it, a single phrase in Caleb's handwriting, "If you remember what I did, you remember me." Jessa returned to her apartment and locked the sketchbook in a drawer. She still dreamed. But now, it wasn't of the root woman. It was of the forest before, lush, alive, neutral. It had never meant to harm anyone, but something ancient had seeped into it. And now? Now it was just a place without names. September 12th at 3:31 p.m., NCBI archive room, final case log. Jessa placed a box on the archive desk. Inside, the dolls, now faceless. Photos of the mouths, now buried. Audio recordings, scrubbed of whispers. And a notebook, completely blank. The clerk reached for a form. "Case name," Jessa thought, then smiled. "No name." The clerk raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes it's better that way." She signed the form, then walked out. Later, at home, Jessa stood in front of her mirror and repeated her own name 3 times. Jessa Morgan, Jessa Morgan, Jessa Morgan. It felt solid, unbroken. But just before bed, she found a slip of paper taped to her door. Folded, yellowed, unmarked. She opened it carefully. It was a child's drawing. Just 2 figures, one small, one tall, walking side by side toward the woods, and beneath them, scribbled in fading graphite. "She doesn't need names anymore." She almost didn't open the notebook again. It had sat untouched in her drawer for over a week. Every time Jessa passed it, something inside her said, "Let it rest." But silence wasn't the same as peace. September 19th, 11:02 a.m., Jess's apartment, Asheville. The day started like any other. Coffee, case reports, a message from David about a trail camera knocked loose during the last storm. Then, on instinct more than reason, she opened Simone's sketchbook. Most pages were as she'd left them. Drawings of trees, underground maps, the root woman, names she could no longer pronounce, but buried near the back, a page that hadn't been there before. The paper was newer, smoother, inserted, not bound. A drawing, black ink, one continuous line, two people standing at the edge of a tree line. One held a lantern, the other a shovel. Their faces were blank. Behind them, half submerged in the forest floor, was a door, smaller than the mouth, but newer. And beside it, written in Simone's tight, angular script, one more. Just one more. Jessa stared at the page for a long time. Her first instinct was to destroy it. But her hands wouldn't move. Something wasn't finished. She returned to the clearing alone. No GPS, no camera, just the sketch and a lantern. The tree where the mouth had been was now nothing more than a husk. Its bark had flaked away, revealing smooth gray wood beneath. No carvings, no signs of life. But nearby, at the base of a ridge, she found it. A door, half buried in moss, smaller than the others, made of fresh pine. The symbol etched onto it, a circle with 3 lines through it. Not roots, bars. Jessa touched the surface. It was warm, not like the others, like it was waiting. She didn't open it. Not this time. Instead, she pulled a marker from her pocket and wrote on the wood. Not this time. Then she placed the sketch inside, folded carefully, walked away, and left the door closed. September 21st, 8 p.m., final report draft. The case file will remain open, but inactive. All known entrances have been sealed. Artifacts are stored under restricted access at NCBI archives. Survivors are under watch, but show no signs of psychological decline. However, I believe the entity we encountered, whether natural or otherwise, feeds not just on names, but on cycles, ritual, return, and most of all, curiosity. I don't know if it's over, but I know I walked away. And I remembered who I was. Detective Jessa Morgan Pisgah, Task Force Retired. That night she stood in her backyard, watching the treetops sway against the moonlight. Somewhere deep inside the woods, something creaked. A shutter, a branch, maybe a door. Jessa whispered to herself, "Not tonight," and closed her eyes. 10 years later, October 13th at 2:12 p.m., Pisgah National Forest, Public Access Trailhead 6. The children moved in clusters, bright backpacks bouncing, their teacher calling reminders from the rear. "Stay on the trail, don't wander off." A boy near the back, Milo, age 9, lagged behind. Not out of disobedience, just curiosity. The forest felt weird, like it was holding its breath. He paused near an old tree stump. Something poked out from beneath the leaves, not shiny, just intentional. He knelt and brushed it back with the sleeve of his jacket. Wood, carved. It was a small plaque, no bigger than his palm. Words etched in faded ink. "Remember the ones with no names." He tilted his head. Below the words was a symbol, a circle with 3 lines through it. He didn't recognize it, but he liked the shape. He slipped it into his pocket and ran to catch up with the others. That night in his room, Milo placed the plaque on his nightstand. The wind picked up outside. His window rattled slightly. He stared at the wood and whispered aloud, "I wonder who left you." And from somewhere inside the forest, something shifted. A long-forgotten creak, like a door. Not opening, not yet. Just remembering where it had been.